Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Frank Ackermann. I'm here to present information security in Plato's Cave. I'm focusing on offshore development and outsourcing, which is a quite interesting topic since a couple of years, especially in Europe, where a couple of companies are thinking about giving away the IT to another company, or other persons bringing up new services, new ideas to, let's say, establish new possibilities to engage money, to engage new work, to engage new companies. Just a disclaimer, this talk does not contain any kind of in-depth technical, techie, script, whatever stuff. It's more about security awareness, more about security architecture and management. And the second thing is, this talk does definitely not reflect the opinion of my employer or the former employers. Who I am? I'm working in security management consulting and architecture since a couple of years. I'm working right now in Düsseldorf in Germany. The address here to upload if you would like to have some additional information or would like to have some extra slides or the slides directly from me. Now let's start directly. Before I'm going to go into the topic of Plato, and the thing is what is offshoring, what is outsourcing, what is the real definition about that? Offshoring is more the word about this power generator, water, windmills in the water thing, which means a couple of energy producing companies placing big windmills anywhere where nobody lives or in the sea to get power. And these plants are out of their territory. They're sometimes in international waters and not directly belong to a certain country. Outsourcing is when you're thinking about to give away certain things out of your company or out of your environment to somebody else. And offshoring is especially when you're talking about buying in developers' knowledge or development from other companies, but not sitting in your house onshore, which means they're sitting offshore. Plato and Plato's Cave, it's a myth. It's an, Plato wrote once a letter to a couple of friends, and he summed up, it's about having people in a cave. These people think that's their reality, and they have to interpret the world and their reality, what the shadows are. I've had contact with Plato's allegory in the museum, actually, about shadows and shadow-making things, and I was pretty impressed, and I thought about, well, it would be a good possibility to explain what's actually happening when we're talking about outsourcing, when we're talking about the possibility to give things away to other companies. Before I'm going to explain it in detail what Plato's meaning and things, I found a very nice YouTube video which describes what is actually all about this, and they're modeling, how's it called? Modeling dough, German word is Knete or Knetmasse, where people made a movie out of that. Just a minute.
Imagine prisoners that have spent their entire lives chained deep inside a cave. They have been chained so that they cannot see behind themselves, and they are forced to stare endlessly at the cave wall in front of them. Behind them, the fire is burning, and between the prisoners and the fire is a raised walkway. Now imagine that each day a menagerie of objects crosses the walkway. Animals, and people carrying their wares to market. Their shapes create an intricate shadow play on the wall in front of the prisoners. This is the only world that the prisoners have ever known. The shadows and the echoes of unseen objects. Now, imagine that the prisoner is released. After some time adjusting to the blinding light, the freed prisoner will begin to experience the world outside of the cave for the very first time. And it is like nothing he could have ever imagined. world, the man will of course want to return to his friends to share his incredible discoveries. But the prisoners cannot recognize their old friend. He appears as all things do. His voice is a distorted echo, and his body is a grotesque shadow. They cannot understand his fantastic stories of the world outside of the cave. To them, it will never exist. This, of course, does not make the world outside of the cave any less real.
So, the intention to show this little movie was to give you more explanation, better explanation what actually Plato's Cave is and which kind of viewpoints we have. We're actually in the position right now that we have been in the real world and we're staying in the cave. Why? Because when we're in the cave, and the cave is actually the situation where we are because we're bringing things towards the light and we say, well, we're not in the real world anymore. We chain ourselves in the cave. Was it kind of weird? I'll go into in detail now. We're in the very bottom of this little picture. We are in the cave. We know that there's a cave and we know that there's shadow. We see the shadows. In the second circle, there's this object or things which actually cast the shadows and the fire itself, and there's the real world. The real world is actually when we're having IT and our own IT and our own company, so we have a direct influence into this, what's actually happening about all the servers, all the applications, which kind of architecture we're having, which kind of processes we have behind that. But when we're thinking about outsourcing, we're pushing ourselves into a cave. We're pushing ourselves into a situation when somebody else is managing the real world and managing the situation, which kind of reality we're going to be displayed. As I mentioned, we're the prisoners. When we're going to think about outsourcing, we're bringing somebody else in a position to show somebody, to make us something new visible, which is actually happening or not. To change our interpretation of which should be implemented. Talking about security, yes. Talking about, for example, compliance. Talking about policies. Talking about controls. Talking about internal control systems. The shadows, when we're sitting in the cave, the shadows are our understanding of what the things might be. That must not be because, as also shown in the shadow in the movie itself, the shadows are kind of grotesque. The people sitting in the cave, sometimes knowing or not knowing what the real world is, just understand, yes, there is a shadow and something might be happening, and they're going to try to understand what does it mean, but without clearly defining what they really would like to, or what they need to see to understand what's really happening in the level of fire or in the reality. It's absolutely not working. The objects, which are in my picture in the second layer, the objects are the thing where the outsourcer in that point is able to show and to describe what kind of shadows should be displayed on the wall. Your supplier, your outsourcer, the person you're going to trust and bring over your IT is the person who produces the shadows. He has the artifacts, he has the objects in the hand and shows it against the fire to cast a shadow. And you are actually the one who's, sorry, I missed kind of a red line. The person who is producing the shadow cannot modify the fire itself, but he can modify how the objects are presented towards the fire and to create a shadow. And the fire, this is actually what we can understand ourselves as a compliance. The fire can be a rule set, a definition, can be a standard to say, well, we would like to see that and that and that way, we would like to have that and that kind of controls, we would like to have a constant reality in our living environment. What does it mean in technical words? We have, for example, a SAS 70 report type 1 or 2. When you're, for example, asking somebody to give you a SAS 70 report, you get an also very good understanding how the mitigations are, how the processes are, what the aspects are behind that. Or you have another, an ISO standard, 2007, 2001, whatever, to describe more or less in a very high level how you can implement compliance, implement security management. But what actually is done, it's not possible to see because you're not really directly in that. It's not, and you're not in your work anymore because you outsourced it. The real world, which is the uppest level, where we have been till yet when your company, for example, is not outsourcing right now. You have the daylight, which is very straight when you know when it's morning, mid, and afternoon. You know that there are different kind of shadows, you know that can be different kind of colors. Everything is perfect. Speaking also technically, we have 0 days attack. We have insider information flowing away. We have information warfare. Companies attacking you, your company, your customers would like to steal information from you. We have vendor problems. You buy in hardware which might be vulnerable. You might have external threats we were never thought about before. This is what actually happened in the outworld, in the real world. But in the real world, there's also something like the good things. Somebody who's really understanding security, persons like you and me, thinking about security all the time, thinking about the possibility to spread the words, to make other people understanding what security management, for example, is. When, like in a movie, we're coming out again, or we're been there, sometimes the daylight hurts. We know the reality is not sometimes very nice, but we also know that this could be the real reality. So, bringing the allegory together with our little, topic. We have been outside, we know what the real world are. We know what kind of standards are possible. We know when we're driving our own IT, what we actually have the possibility to focus on. So the next thing is we know that there are real objects, that there are a real fire, and there are certain things we can check, for example, doing internal controls, focusing on certain topics. We've seen that and we know that things are casting shadows. So when we're thinking now about offshore development, outsourcing, IT information things, and we're thinking also about outsourcing that, giving away the things we had control in before, we're deep, deep in the cave. When we're in the cave, we do not have control on the fire, and we do not directly have control on the shadows. But the major difference between Plato and our example is when we're sitting in the cave and your outsourcer, in that case the person very close to the fire, is casting the shadows, we are able to speak with them. We're able to say, well, please can you highlight certain things, or please can you produce that and that shadow, because then we can believe that that and that object, or that and that rule, or that and that implementation. Last but not least, we can't change the cave. When we're talking about offshoring and outsourcing, there are different types of things where what actually could happen, and what I'm pretty sure a lot of companies do. A lot of companies do definitely outsourcing and types of consulting services, which means when you're limited on resources or you can't buy or hire employees on the market with specific know-how, you buy in consultancy. When you're thinking about using, for example, cloud services, it's quite interesting. We're talking about IT hosting, only certain parts of your applications running, for example, anywhere but not on your side. You can outsource or you can offshore development, which means, for example, you're in a specific market, you have specific needs, you would like to have a real fast reaction on development. So you might think, well, I'm not hiring a lot of developers on my side, I would like to have just the resources ready when a project is starting. So what you can do is, for example, buy developers in India, buy developers anywhere in Europe, anywhere in South Africa or South America. So you just bring over the idea what to develop, and you do all the development, the non-technical part on your side, describe what you really would like to have, and then you ship it over and say, well, build me until that date, send me back your information or the binary. And you can source out parts of the IT or parts of the company. For example, project management is a good example where a lot of companies thinking about that they're splitting project management, which is absolutely possible work to outsource or to buy in consultancy. By the way, you can also outsource HR because it's also not one of the base and core services your company normally has. Or you can buy out or sell out or outsource your complete IT, which means partnering. For example, when you're owning a bakery and you do a lot of very good pretzels and breads and whatever, your core business is doing bakery stuff and not IT. So when you're thinking about, well, why not do some online shop things for my bread stuff and send it over? You can buy in services for your IT transfer or services for shipping costs or online services or a combination between an online shop and a delivery service. So what is the real reason to do that? Next to hidden agendas, which might be totally political, mostly it's getting rid of people, getting things away, certain non-core business, or getting, last but not least, getting rid of the IT, because IT sometimes is not really in focus. Even, for example, in financial environments, even, for example, in trading environments, the people are thinking, well, we're trading, most of the applications based on IT, they're doing a lot of information processing on IT, but they're not thinking about that this is really one of their core aspects. And also, last but not least, it's talking about money. Everybody I spoke with who does outsourcing or thought about outsourcing or offshoring or whatever managed to say, well, it's all about costs, we're saving costs, but it's definitely not. Because normally when you outsource, you first have you should have start a very big project to think about what you really would like to do. And the next thing is sometimes it takes over 1, 2, 3 years to really outsource this part or the complete part of your IT. So when everybody says, well, we save a lot of costs, no way. The second is, it's like Rosie. Everybody talks about a return on security investment. It's a nice topic, but nobody really established it in the company. So it's the same. This was already mentioned. We have been outside, now we're inside, now we're going to try to interpret what the shadows are, what's actually happening. And what is the difference between the shadows in our new world, which means within the cave, or what is the difference to the real world itself, which means we know what we can control, we know what there is, we know what there was, and now we have to make a match. So we're the ones in the cave. We know who's producing the shadows. We can change the situation. Here we go. And that is what we actually have to do. We have to think about which kind of world information do we need in our cave to regulate it, even when we're doing outsourcing. And then you can say, well, might be a lot of things to do. Oh, yes, of course, we can use standards. Standards. Industry standards, a lot of sometimes really good stuff popped up in the last couple of years, and a lot of outsourcers also present. By the way, is anybody of you working for an outsourcer or an offshore service company? No. What a pity. SAS 70 report. It's a great opportunity to ask for. It's a great opportunity to show up to the auditors and say, well, we have a supplier already. We have somebody here with a binding contract. You can show up a SAS 70 report. A SAS 70 report shows on in-depth security aspects nothing. The same like ISO 20001 or the implementation of ISO 20005. When you're certified to certain audit aspects where the auditors of the audited company thought about, have on their checklist. But in my opinion and what I experienced, there was so till yet that your certification does not really describe that this person is really sure. They have certain aspects implemented, they have very good ideas sometimes, or sometimes a very good change management or incident management or service management or whatever, but they're not, well, they might be as secure or more secure as you or have you been before, but this kind of standards does not show that. It's more or less comparable, but you cannot say, well, we have two competitors we would like to challenge, and both have the SAS 70 report and an ISO 01, ISO XYZ certificate and license, which of one is better. You have to look in depth what's happening. We have COVID standards, for example. We have ITIL standards. We have PCI-DSS, which came up in the last couple of years, and which is a pretty money-making thing. Next to the industry standards, you have a lot of baselines, governance aspects which are coming up, policy-specific laws, policy-specific guidelines, development guidelines in the other company which might not be comparable to your development guidelines before, individual compliance checks, company's maturity level, which means sometimes your maturity level might not be the same, might be lower or higher than the maturity level of the company you buy in. I experienced one time that a company outsourced certain parts of IT and said, well, we do it with a company in India. And then after around about a year of challenging both sides, they realized that the maturity level of the Indian company was much more higher and very specific, and they had very good ideas for how to practice, how to do processes, how to document, and the company who actually ordered the stuff weren't able to compare it because the maturity level was too low to understand what they really do. Surrounding of national laws, that's another aspect which is quite interesting. When you're doing business in Europe and you're doing business with companies in Europe, it's quite easy because you have the European law and European governments. You have local national laws, but when you're talking about non-national or non-Europe connections towards Europe or towards, for example, India, America, Russia, South Africa, it's quite interesting to get this all together, to get this, first of all, comparable, to really make it possible, for example, to transfer information. Well, also, for example, when there are certain encryption laws in place, for example, delivering information towards France, towards China, towards US might be interesting sometimes. Of course, you have language problems. For example, when you're having a French-speaking or German-speaking company who would like to outsource, and they're thinking about outsourcing things to Brazil or to India, and not everybody in your own company or the ordering company is speaking English, so it might be sometimes quite interesting to get your work done you would like to go out or you would like to outsource. And additionally, you have cultural problems. Coming back to the industry standards, even when there is an industry standard and you're pretty described in detail, pretty precise, which kind of change management you would like to see, which kind of controls you would like to see, which kind of evidences you would like to have on the audits. Even it's so precise, nobody really could misunderstand that. The description is coming from you from, for example, European environment. When you bring this over to China, to India, to Brazil, to whatever, the people might understand what you mean, but might deliver different evidences, different aspects, which are not, let's say, matched directly to that what you really need. Risks and benefits. When you say you would like to outsource, yes, you put yourself in a position. And then you have to think about what is definitely your real core business. And then you can say, well, I would like to do that because of certain things. And are there risks? Yes, there are. And another thing I've learned that sometimes it's very interesting to talk not about risks, more talk about challenges or talk about chances. So I try to bring that in later on, but we should also talk about chances. we're talking about this risk and benefit aspect, the confidence aspect is very interesting. When you say you would like to give something away, for example, your wallet with your complete money, which more or less can be your information, your holy grail. You give it to somebody else. You can do more or less two things. You can trust him like it's your best bro, or you can say, well, I would like to control you. These are the both aspects you have. And the middle in between is more or less to accept the residual risks, which is mostly done in the business, which is mostly done in risk-controlled and risk-pushed environment, for example, in trading houses. That's their job. They're doing risk acceptance, or they're pushing risks to get more money. What are the real benefits on doing outsourcing, bringing, let's say, your holy grail into another company? You're flexible. For example, the consultancy aspect. You're total flexible. When you run your complete projects or the complete project management by a consultancy company, just by in the resources without any problem. When you say you're here next week, they're in next week. You can extend and increase the possibility of knowledge. You can say, well, I would like to buy in, for example, security consultancy, and they have to train our administrators. Perfect. You can also increase your business, as I mentioned, this transfer delivery and online shop thing. The bakery is not able to implement IT as normal IT persons do, so they buy in the resources and say, well, other people can do it better. Here we go. What are the risks? The risks, when we're talking about IT partnering, which means the total IT is away. You're giving away the IT heart, everything, all the services, all the applications, all the connections, everything, away to another company. You might lose your data. You might have the possibility to also lose control of the evidences, which means you don't have any evidences. So when the auditors at the end of the year come up and say, well, please show me where your data is, and anywhere in the cloud at an IT partner, you don't have a clue. And this is what you have to say. You're losing also the possibility of influence your architecture. For example, then when you're outsourcing or you're ordering IT by another company, you normally say, I would like to have web services, but you're not having a possibility to discuss, well, I would like to have that and that kind of product, and that kind of version. I would like to have I prefer, for example, WebSphere or Tomcat or not IIS, whatever. And there's a risk that your IT partner, which might have different or certain clients, they might blend your information, which mix it up. For example, when they're not segregating the databases where your data is stored, sometimes it happens, I've heard, that data is mixed up. When you are sourcing out parts of your IT, for example, application management only or other services, you might lose also company data. You might also lose knowledge of the application, or for example, when you're sourcing out project management only, you might also lose knowledge of how the project management works, or lose knowledge of the application itself or the business knowledge. Sometimes it's also very important to have direct contact into the business, which is internally more possible than working externally. As I mentioned, support and consulting can be outsourced, which means also that you have the risk on knowledge can be lost or knowledge is transferred, and that the results which are produced for your side is reused. Last but not least, when you're also having consultancy into your company, or you directly outsource certain things to consultancy, you might have risks in integrity or confidentiality, because a lot of data exchange is not possible with a secured line, or the consultancy company is not so big, they're having a big PKI in backbone, they're having not a secure mailing services, there's no possibility to send your data around. Major and big issues when you're doing development and you're outsourcing the complete development. You have the the great, let's say, issue to think about local admin rights and the special development equipment, which is actually happening. When developers are in your house or developing offshore, they would like to have extended rights to really, really, really implement in depth to install certain software. When you're sitting in there in your house, which means to open your environment, asking somebody else developing for you, you don't have a clue what's actually running on their machines or on your machines by them having extended rights. Malicious code in your source code or in the binary might be a problem. You don't have a clue what's actually happening there unless you control it. Open source code and closed software source code, sorry, open source code and closed source code is a quite interesting aspect also for licensing, which means, for example, when you ask certain developers to develop things for you, to find solutions, and they just copy and paste open source aspects, which you can't directly regulate because it's outsourced, you get a license problem, because then you're breaking open source license, and then you might also break other licenses which are directly linked to that. Or, which is also doing the consultancy way, reuse of code snippets, which means, for example, you're in a trading business, and you would like to get a development for a certain method to create a forecast, which is very important for your business. When you use this method in another, let's say, environment, like let's say your competitor, he might reuse this as his model. And then the competitor is having, let's say, more information that you have. That's another aspect. And one very interesting thing is testing data. I've heard that a lot of developers are not really, let's say, happy when they're having anonymized information, which means data which is not real productive data. So they would like to have direct access to the production to get real productive data, not only test data. Or when they're using test data and something goes wrong then in production, then they're saying or complaining, well, we didn't have real production data to test it. Maybe it's now possible to do that and that and that. But you're still shipping over, especially when the developers are sitting offsite, you're shipping over the test data and your production data anywhere else. Data exchange is very interesting when they're sitting offshore and at onshore. Virtual environment is quite interesting. Sometimes you don't have a direct access when they're using virtual environment. Intellectual property, copyright aspects might be very interesting, and sometimes subcontractor aspects are coming in, which means that you're offshoring and this person's also offshoring. For example, you ask somebody in India to do something, and they're organizing developers which are quite cheaper than themselves from Pakistan. Last but not least, you're the owner of your data, you're the owner of your business, and you have to think about what you really would like to shift over. So, we have to mitigate, yes. We have to know the risks, yes. And I have only 10 minutes, yes. First mitigation, strategy, strategy, strategy. I can't repeat it often. More often, it's so important to first think about what you really would like to do, to first think about what you would like to achieve. What is the thing, what you really would like to do concerning your business, what you would like to do with your IT. What is the IT strategy behind it? And then afterwards, what is your really IT information strategy? Know what to order and not only do a handshake on the golf course. Information security aspects, classify, it's also standard, it's nothing new. Classify your data, classify your information workflow, classify your business, know what you really have, know what your really assets are, know the holy grail. Then you can describe what your really access controls are, what you really need. This is what I mentioned with the fire shadow thing. When you know what you're having, and you know what you expect, you can directly, very in-depth, concrete, describe what you want. Overthink your controls. Sometimes companies implement internal control systems, which are quite good, and they have a lot of things to cover, but sometimes the description of the control is so, let's say, not detailed, that the evidences which are created are not usable. Only for auditors to say, well, it's done, but that's all. Audit and compliance, the same thing. Think about your security guideline. Think about what again, think about what you really would like to have. Think about what your strategy is, and then describe it in a security guideline. And this security guideline should be also cover the ODCs, and the ODCs should understand what you need and should sign that off. Define also the way of incident handling, which is one of the biggest one of the major problems which are happening. The people are having incident management processes which are quite good, but when something is happening with your data, you might, for example, get only once a month an information about that, because this is written in the policy or this is written in the contract. This is quite easy. Think about segregating networks, think about segregation duties, define information flow and exchange possibilities, and overthink your entries, which means, for example, working with a consultancy company, think about exchanging data securely. Law and regulation. Before you start and before you really start, think what you want, again, strategy, and then write in a request for proposal and do security there. Not do have, let's say, a nice, well, we do promise to do that later, but it's not in a request for proposal. When you're in security and you have the possibility to develop and inject security in request for proposal, do it. It's quite important. And revise and think about your sourcing strategy, which leads directly the contractual flaw of the complete outsourcing aspect. When you would like to buy in, for example, development companies or smaller one- or two-man shows for certain developments which are very specific, describe that in the contract, very concrete, know what you would like to have. And then the second thing is describe what your sourcing strategy is. For example, if something's happening wrong, do you would like to get rid of this? Do you would like to get rid of this person or the company or not? Also, which should be in your contract and which should not be negotiable is intellectual property rights, copyrights, the law aspects, data protection law. For example, data protection law in Europe is quite strong compared to other regions. Penalty aspects, if something's happening wrong, you should charge certain persons. Development and architecture, it's the same. Virtualization, it's quite interesting because a lot of companies work with virtualization. When you would like to do that, think about that before you realize that. The same with local admin rights. Who can help? This is quite an interesting stuff. When you're thinking about doing the outsourcing and think about, well, I'm not really in the best position to discuss that or not, well, I would like to buy somebody in to organize me the outsourcing, why not do that? I said, well, it's not possible, nobody's offering that. It is. I found one example of a company, they're offering outsourcing for outsourcing. Best is just to have a closer look at the internet side, which kind of service they offer, and they're doing everything. You don't have to think about. This brings you in a position in the old world. In the Plato's real world thing, you have business orders IT, which means the IT is directly, when you're in the business, directly in your charge, you have directly access to it. The new situation would be the outsourcer there, and your IT is doing kind of demand management. So the business is talking to IT, and the IT, as the demand manager, is pushing that over to the outsourcer or partner, whatever. And this supported situation is quite interesting, that your business is ordering your IT, the IT is doing something together with the outsourcing service, and the outsourcing service is directly demand managing the outsourcer. I think this helps really good. Another thing is, by the way, ramp-up services are offered, but nobody's thinking about shutting that down, which means everybody's saying, well, we're pushing that over, but nobody's pushing that back. Conclusion. Last but not least, strategy. Think about what you want. Think about what you need. Think about which kind of business you have, and what you actually would like to contractual bind, what you really would like to do with it. You know what the real world looks like, so think about, do you would like to return to the fire, which means do you would like to engage yourself in discussion with the ODC and think about what the real shadows are, or do you would like to stay in the cave and be chained and accept everything which happens coming from the upper light anywhere. order what you need, order the evidences you would like to have, order sometimes concrete audits on site, which means when you're not trusting that person, go over and ask, look for it, and be sure you're in the right location. For example, you're flying over uproad to any country and ask your supporter, well, could you please show us around? And they're showing you a very shiny building, which looks great. The logo is on the company's house. The housing is great. The security on site is great. Everything looks perfect. Everybody's dressed up perfect. Everybody's so shiny. Then you fly back and have, let's say, a kind of weird feeling in your stomach because it was too clean. Maybe you should think over if you're in the right environment. To stay in the cave, you have to do some efforts. You have to do something, and you have to think about it before. And you have to do comprehensive analysis before that, not during that. I've seen a lot of projects where offshoring, IT partnering, outsourcing were happening, and nobody thought about before that. They directly thought about starting with the project because it came from the senior management. I would like to thank you for your interest. I would like to thanks for DeepSec organization and invitation. And if you have any questions, feel free.
If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Does it raise hand? Little raise. Sven, do you have a question?
I'm reading the cartoon.
I'm going to interrupt you reading the cartoon. So no questions, anyone? Possibly Stefan wants to tell us, like, I mean, your experience, not talking in the perspective of your employer, whatever, as a private, consultant. What's the fail scenario you've met? The most common fail scenario you've seen in the wild?
The common or the worst case?
Maybe both, if you could. The worst case sounds funnier.
The worst case I've heard from was shipping over productive data by a delivering service, like postal, parcel service, whatever. And the complete package, the complete bundle of data stored on, I think it was German word is Magnetbänder, magnet tapes, was lost away. Not encrypted, not nothing, and everybody said, well, it's not too good, but well, happens. And afterwards, everybody said, well, it was important because the developer would like to have the productive environment, or would like to have a copy of the productive environment. That was not too good. Most common is, I think, to buy in developers because you don't get enough knowledge on the market sometimes for specific environments or for specific development. But this, for example, SAP development, when you're having very good ABAP programmers, they're not working in your company, they're working for a consultancy company because they're earning double or twice what you can pay. So you buy in for a certain project, for example, an ABAP programmer. But he knows much more on SAP and everything on ABAP you ever could know. So what might happen is that he can think of changing code, or let's say think of the problems you have in your roles and rights model in the SAP, and might get, let's say, this information left on the table at the competitor side. So this might be one of the, let's say, quite critical and interesting situations. Good, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.